Start with responsibility, not recognition. Strong stats line. Most people spend their entire lives waiting to be noticed, but the ones who truly rise are the ones who decide to act before anyone is watching. There comes a point where you have to accept a hard truth. Nobody is obligated to recognize your struggle. Nobody owes you applause for the battles you're fighting behind closed doors. And the moment you stop expecting it is the exact moment your life begins to change. Because recognition is external, it is unpredictable, and it is often delayed. But responsibility is internal, it is immediate, and it is always available to you. When you shift your focus from being seen to taking ownership, you step into a different level of control. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. Most people delay their growth because they are emotionally tied to being understood. They want someone to say, "I see how hard this is for you," before they move forward. But the truth is, progress doesn't wait for validation. Progress demands action even when nobody understands your situation. It demands consistency when nobody is clapping. It demands effort when it feels like no one is paying attention. And this is where the separation happens. This is where average ends and excellence begins. Taking responsibility means you stop explaining why things are hard and start focusing on what you can do about them. It means you stop pointing at circumstances, people, or past events, and you start asking a more powerful question: what is within my control right now? Because no matter how unfair your situation is, there is always something you can do. Maybe it's a small step, maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's not perfect, but it is yours to take. And that step, repeated over time, becomes momentum. There is a quiet strength in people who don't announce their struggles, but instead build through them. They don't wait for permission, they don't wait for encouragement, they don't wait for the perfect moment. They understand that waiting is often just fear in disguise. So they act, they move, they build, even when it's messy, even when it's slow, even when it feels like nothing is changing. Because they know something most people ignore: responsibility compounds. Every time you choose ownership over excuses, you strengthen your mindset. Every time you act without recognition, you build resilience. Every time you push forward without validation, you develop confidence that cannot be taken away. And over time, this creates a version of you that doesn't rely on external approval to function. You become self-driven, self-reliant, and unstoppable in a way that doesn't need an audience. Recognition, when it comes, is a byproduct. It is not the goal. And often it arrives long after the work has been done. But if you make recognition your focus, you will quit too early. You will lose motivation when the spotlight isn't on you. You will question your worth when no one is watching. But if you make responsibility your foundation, you remove that dependency entirely. You show up because you said you would. You improve because you decided to. You grow because you took ownership. This is where real power lives, not in being seen, but in becoming. Not in being acknowledged, but in being accountable. Because at the end of the day, your life is shaped not by who noticed your struggle, but by how you responded to it when nobody did. Your struggle is not your identity's strong stats line. The moment you confuse what you are going through with who you are, you begin to limit the person you are capable of becoming. There is a dangerous line that many people cross without realizing it. It's the line between experiencing struggle and becoming defined by it. At first, it feels natural to talk about what you're going through. It feels valid to explain the pressure, the setbacks, the failures. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. The struggle stops being something you face and starts becoming something you are. And once that shift happens, growth slows down, confidence weakens, and your future begins to shrink. Struggle is a chapter, not the whole story. It is a moment in time, not a permanent label. But when you attach your identity to your pain, you start making decisions that protect the struggle instead of escaping it. You begin to act in ways that reinforce the narrative you've built about yourself. You hesitate to take risks because it doesn't align with the identity you've accepted. You doubt opportunities because they don't match the version of you that you've convinced yourself is real. And without realizing it, you build a life around limitations that were never meant to define you. The truth is, everyone goes through difficult phases. Everyone experiences moments where things fall apart, where progress feels slow, where nothing seems to be working. But the people who rise are not the ones who avoid struggle. They are the ones who refuse to let it define them. They see it for what it is, a temporary condition that requires action, not attachment. They don't deny the pain, but they don't build a home inside it either. There is strength in detachment, not emotional numbness, but clarity. The ability to say, this is what I am facing, but it is not who I am. That distinction changes everything, because when you separate your identity from your circumstances, you regain control. You stop personalizing every setback. You stop interpreting failure as proof of your limitations. Instead, you start seeing it as feedback, as information, as part of the process. When your identity is built on growth rather than struggle, your actions begin to change. You start asking better questions. What can I learn from this? Not why am I like this, but how can I improve? And those questions lead to movement. They lead to solutions. They lead to progress that would never happen if you stayed trapped in the identity of struggle. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from refusing to label yourself by your worst moments. It allows you to walk into new situations without carrying the weight of the past. It allows you to take opportunities without the fear of repeating old patterns, because you no longer see yourself as the person who struggled. You see yourself as the person who is evolving, and evolution requires space. Space to fail, to adapt, to grow, to become something different. But if your identity is locked into your struggle, there is no space for change. You remain the same person, facing the same problems, repeating the same patterns. Breaking that cycle starts with a decision. A decision to stop introducing yourself to the world through your pain and start defining yourself through your potential. You are not your past mistakes. You are not your current difficulties. You are not the obstacles in your way. Those things are real, but they are not permanent unless you choose to make them so. Your identity is something you build, something you shape through your actions, your mindset, and your willingness to grow beyond what you are experiencing right now. The moment you let go of the idea that your struggle defines you is the moment you create space for a stronger, more capable version of yourself to emerge. Growth happens in silence, strong stats line. While most people seek attention for their efforts, the ones who truly transform are the ones who build in silence when no one is watching. There is a phase in life that feels invisible. No recognition, no applause, no external validation. Just effort repeated day after day without immediate results. This is the phase most people try to avoid. They want progress to be seen. They want their journey to be acknowledged. They want reassurance that what they are doing matters. But the truth is, the most important growth you will ever experience happens in silence, away from the noise, away from the spotlight, in moments where nobody is paying attention. Silence is where discipline is tested, when there is no audience, no pressure to perform, no reward waiting at the end of the day. Your actions reveal your true commitment. It becomes easy to quit when nobody would notice. It becomes easy to slow down when there is no accountability. And that is exactly why this phase matters, because what you do in silence builds the foundation for everything that comes later. Most people underestimate the power of unseen effort. They focus on visible success, on the results that can be shared, celebrated, and admired, but they ignore the process that leads to it. The early mornings when motivation is low, the late nights when progress feels small, the repetition of tasks that seem insignificant in the moment but are essential over time. These moments do not look impressive, but they are where real change happens. There is a quiet strength in choosing to continue without recognition. It requires a different kind of mindset, one that is not dependent on external validation. You begin to rely on your own standards instead of others' opinions. You measure progress by consistency rather than applause, and over time, this creates a level of discipline that is not easily shaken. Silence also removes distraction. When you're not focused on being seen, you are free to focus on becoming. You're not performing for others, you are improving for yourself. This shift allows you to be more honest with your weaknesses, more committed to your growth, and more willing to do the work that others avoid, because there is no need to impress anyone, only a need to improve. There is also a level of patience that develops in silence. Growth is rarely instant. It takes time, repetition, and persistence. When you are working quietly, you learn to trust the process without needing constant proof. You understand that results are delayed, that progress is not always visible, and that consistency eventually leads to outcomes. This patience becomes one of your greatest strengths, because it allows you to continue when others give up. Many people quit during this phase because it feels like nothing is happening. They don't see immediate results, they don't receive recognition, and they begin to doubt their efforts. But what they fail to realize is that change is happening beneath the surface. Skills are being developed, habits are being formed, resilience is being built. It may not be visible yet, but it is real. And when it finally shows, it appears sudden to others, even though it was built slowly over time. The people who succeed are not always the most talented or the most fortunate. They are often the ones who are willing to stay consistent in silence longer than others. They embraced the phase that most people avoid. They understood that the lack of recognition was not a sign to stop, but a space to grow without pressure. When your focus shifts from being noticed to being better, everything changes. You stop seeking approval and start seeking progress. You stop comparing your journey to others and start committing to your own path. And in that silence, you build something powerful, something real, something that does not depend on anyone else's attention. Because when the results finally come, when the growth becomes visible, when the recognition eventually arrives, it will not be because you demanded attention, but because you earned it through the work you did when nobody was watching. The world responds to value, not excuses. Strong stats line, the marketplace of life does not reward reasons, it rewards results created through consistent value. There is a harsh but liberating truth that many people avoid facing. The world does not measure your intentions, your struggles, or your explanations. It responds to what you produce. It responds to the value you bring, the problems you solve, and the consistency you demonstrate over time. You may have valid reasons for where you are. You may have faced obstacles that others cannot see, but the reality remains the same. Reasons explain your situation, but they do not change it. Excuses are often disguised as explanations. They sound logical, they feel justified, and they provide temporary comfort. They protect your ego from discomfort and give you a way to avoid responsibility. But every time you lean on an excuse, you reinforce a mindset that keeps you stuck. Because instead of asking what you can do next, you focus on why you cannot move forward. And that shift, small as it seems, determines the direction of your life. Value, on the other hand, is undeniable. It speaks louder than words, louder than intentions, louder than promises. When you consistently bring something useful, something meaningful, something impactful, people respond. Opportunities appear. Doors open. Not because the world suddenly became fair, but because you became valuable in a way that cannot be ignored. This does not mean your struggles are meaningless. They matter. They shape your perspective. They build your resilience. They teach you lessons that cannot be learned any other way. But their purpose is not to be presented as justification for staying the same. Their purpose is to be transformed into something useful, into skills, into insight, into strength that can be applied in the real world. The shift from excuses to value begins with a simple but powerful question. Instead of asking why things are difficult, ask what you can contribute despite the difficulty. Instead of focusing on what is missing, focus on what you can build. Because even in the worst situations, there is always something within your control, a skill you can improve, a habit you can develop, a problem you can solve, even if it is small. Consistency plays a critical role in this process. One act of value is not enough. One moment of effort does not define you. It is the repeated action, the daily commitment to improvement that builds momentum. And momentum creates visibility, not through self-promotion, but through results that speak for themselves. There is also a level of accountability that comes with focusing on value. You can no longer hide behind circumstances. You can no longer rely on external factors to determine your progress. You begin to see your growth as your responsibility, something that is shaped by your actions rather than your environment. This mindset is not always comfortable, but it is empowering, because it puts control back in your hands. Many people wait for the perfect conditions before they decide to act. They wait for more time, more resources, more clarity, but those conditions rarely come. And even if they do, they are temporary. The people who move forward are the ones who start where they are with what they have and focus on creating value step by step. They do not allow imperfections to stop them. They use them as part of the process. Over time, this approach changes how the world sees you, not because you demanded attention, but because you earned it. People begin to trust your consistency. They recognize your effort. They respond to the results you create. And what once felt invisible starts to gain momentum. Excuses will always be available. There will always be reasons to delay, to doubt, to hesitate. But value requires a different standard. It requires action when it is inconvenient, effort when it is uncomfortable, and persistence when it is difficult. And those who commit to that standard separate themselves from the majority, because in the end, it is not your story that determines your future. It is what you choose to build from it when you decide to stop explaining and start creating. Discipline is stronger than emotion. Strong stats line. The people who win are not the ones who feel the most motivated. They are the ones who act even when they feel nothing at all. There is a common belief that success is driven by motivation, by passion, by the emotional highs that make you feel unstoppable. But emotions are unpredictable. They rise, they fall, they shift without warning. One day you feel focused, the next day you feel drained. One moment you are inspired, the next you are full of doubt. If your actions depend on how you feel, your progress will always be inconsistent. Discipline changes that. Discipline is not built on feelings, it is built on decisions. It is the ability to show up regardless of your mood, regardless of your energy, regardless of your circumstances. It is the commitment to do what needs to be done, even when you do not feel like doing it. And that is what separates those who move forward from those who stay stuck. Emotions are powerful, but they are temporary. They can push you to start, but they cannot sustain you over time. Motivation might get you excited about a goal, but it will not carry you through the days when progress feels slow, when results are not visible, when effort feels repetitive and exhausting. That is where discipline takes over. It fills the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Most people negotiate with their emotions. They wake up and ask themselves how they feel before deciding what to do. If they feel good, they act. If they feel tired, they delay. If they feel uncertain, they hesitate. And over time, this pattern creates inconsistency. It creates a cycle where progress is always starting and stopping, never building enough momentum to create real change. Discipline removes that negotiation. It creates a standard that does not depend on your emotional state. You do the work because it is part of your routine, part of your identity, part of the person you are becoming. You do not question it every day. You do not wait for the right feeling. You act because you have decided that this is what you do. There is a quiet power in that level of consistency. It builds confidence, not because things are easy, but because you trust yourself to follow through. You know that even on your worst days, you will still take action. And that trust becomes a foundation. It allows you to take on bigger challenges, to set higher goals, to push beyond your comfort zone because you are no longer dependent on unpredictable emotions. Discipline also creates freedom. At first it may feel restrictive, like you are forcing yourself to follow rules or routines, but over time it becomes automatic. The habits you build reduce decision-making. They reduce hesitation. They create a structure that supports your growth without requiring constant effort to maintain it. What once felt difficult becomes normal. There will always be moments when emotions are strong. Moments of doubt, frustration, fatigue. Moments where everything in you wants to stop. And those are the moments that matter most. Because every time you choose discipline over emotion, you strengthen your ability to stay consistent. You reinforce the mindset that your actions are not controlled by temporary feelings. This does not mean ignoring your emotions completely. They have value. They provide insight. They signal when something needs attention. They add meaning to your experiences. But they should not dictate your actions. They should inform you, not control you. Because if you allow emotions to lead, you will always be at their mercy. The people who achieve lasting success understand this deeply. They do not rely on feeling ready. They do not wait for perfect conditions. They build systems, routines, and habits that keep them moving forward even when motivation is gone. They create a structure that supports progress in every situation, and over time, this consistency compounds. Small actions repeated daily turn into significant results. Effort that once felt insignificant begins to show. Progress that once seemed slow begins to accelerate. Not because of a sudden burst of motivation, but because of steady, disciplined action carried out over time. Because in the end, it is not how you feel in the moment that defines your future. It is what you choose to do despite those feelings. When discipline becomes your standard, turn pain into purpose. Strong stats line. The same pain that could have destroyed you can become the force that defines you when you decide to give it direction. Pain is one of the most powerful forces you will ever experience. It can break your confidence, drain your energy, and leave you questioning everything about your path. It can make you feel stuck, lost, and disconnected from who you thought you were. And for many people, that is where the story ends. They carry the weight of their pain without ever transforming it, allowing it to shape their limits instead of their potential. But pain has another side, one that is rarely talked about. It contains energy. It carries intensity, focus, and depth that comfort can never provide. When you learn how to direct that energy, pain becomes more than something you endure. It becomes something you use. It becomes a tool for growth, a source of clarity, and a foundation for purpose. The difference between those who are defined by pain and those who are driven by it lies in one decision, the decision to assign meaning. If you see your pain as something that happened to you, something unfair and unchangeable, it will continue to weigh you down. It will shape your thoughts, your actions, and your expectations in ways that limit your growth. But if you choose to see it as something that can be used, something that can teach you, something that can push you forward, everything begins to shift. Purpose is not something you find outside of yourself. It is something you build from within, often from the most difficult experiences you face. Your struggles give you perspective. They show you what matters. They reveal your strengths and expose your weaknesses. They force you to adapt, to think differently, to grow in ways that comfort never demands. And in that process, you begin to understand how your experiences can serve something greater. There is a moment when pain can either harden you or refine you. If you resist it, if you avoid it, if you allow it to turn into bitterness, it will close you off. It will make you defensive, hesitant, and limited in how you move forward. But if you face it directly, if you learn from it, if you use it as fuel, it will sharpen your focus. It will strengthen your mindset. It will prepare you for challenges that once felt impossible. Turning pain into purpose does not happen instantly. It is a process that requires reflection, honesty, and action. You have to be willing to look at your experiences without denial. You have to ask difficult questions. What did this teach me? How did this change me? What can I build from this? And those answers guide your next steps. They help you move from reaction to intention. There's also a sense of direction that comes from this transformation. When you connect your experiences to a larger goal, your actions become more meaningful. You are no longer just trying to escape pain. You are using it to create something valuable. Whether it is growth, impact, strength, or contribution, your efforts are driven by something deeper than temporary emotion. Many people wait for pain to disappear before they move forward. They believe they need to feel better before they can act, but the truth is, purpose is often built while the pain is still present. It is built in the moments where you choose to keep going, to keep learning, to keep improving despite the discomfort. It is built through action, not avoidance. Over time, what once felt like a burden begins to feel like a source of strength. Not because the pain was easy, but because you chose to use it. You chose to grow from it. You chose to turn it into something that adds value to your life instead of taking away from it. And that choice changes everything. Because in the end, pain is inevitable, but suffering without purpose is optional. And the moment you decide to give your pain direction is the moment you begin to transform it into something that works for you instead of against you.